March 11th, 1942, 11:34 p.m. The gunfire started before Bumpy Johnson even saw the shooters. He was walking into a warehouse on 125th Street for what he'd been told was a sit-down about a shipment dispute. Routine business. Or so he thought. The first bullet hit him in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. The second tore through his chest. By the third, he was already falling. According to witnesses who were blocks away, the shooting lasted less than 30 seconds. But in those 30 seconds, 3 gunmen emptied their weapons into one man. 12 shots. Maybe more. The count varied depending on who told the story later. What didn't vary was this. Bumpy Johnson went down hard, blood pooling beneath him on that warehouse floor. And the shooters ran, absolutely certain they'd just killed the most dangerous man in Harlem. One of them allegedly said as they fled, "He's done." Nobody walks away from that. Harlem Hospital. Emergency room. Bumpy was carried in by 2 of his men who'd found him minutes after the shooting. He was unconscious, barely breathing, blood soaking through makeshift bandages they'd wrapped around his torso. Dr. Samuel Richardson, the attending physician that night, reportedly took one look and started barking orders. Get him to surgery. Now. And somebody call for more blood. We're going to need a lot of it. The nurses moved fast, cutting away Bumpy's clothes, exposing the damage. Entry wounds in his shoulder, chest, abdomen, thigh. Exit wounds in his back. A bullet still lodged near his spine. Another fragment scattered through his left lung. One of the younger nurses, according to accounts, turned away. She'd seen gunshot victims before, but nothing like this. Dr. Richardson started the surgery at midnight. He would work for the next 4 hours straight, trying to keep a man alive who, by all medical logic, should already be dead. Word traveled through Harlem faster than the ambulance that had rushed Bumpy to the hospital. By midnight, everyone knew. The king had been hit. Bad. Real bad. Illinois Gordon got the news while he was at Small's Paradise. He was out the door before the messenger finished talking. Junie Bird heard about it at his apartment on Edgecombe. He grabbed his coat and his gun and headed for the hospital. By 12:15 a.m., Bumpy's inner circle, 8 men who'd been with him for years, were gathered in Harlem Hospital's waiting room. Silent. Grim. Waiting. A doctor came out at 12:30. His scrubs were covered in blood. He's still alive, the doctor said. Barely. The next 6 hours will tell us if he makes it through the night. Illinois looked at Junie. Who did this? Don't know yet, Junie said quietly. But we're going to find out. Inside the operating room, Dr. Richardson was fighting a losing battle against blood loss. Every time he stopped one source of bleeding, another would start. Bumpy's blood pressure kept dropping. His heart rate was erratic. We're losing him, one of the surgical nurses said. Richardson didn't respond. Just kept working. Hands moving with precision, even as exhaustion set in. He removed bullet fragments from Bumpy's lung, repaired a torn artery in his abdomen, stabilized the shoulder wound. But the bullet near the spine, that one was too dangerous to remove. One wrong move, and Bumpy Johnson would be paralyzed for life. If he even survived the night. At 1:45 a.m., Bumpy's heart stopped. He's flatlining, a nurse shouted. Richardson grabbed the defibrillator. Clear. The shock hit Bumpy's chest. His body jerked. The monitor stayed flat. Again. Another shock. Another jolt. And then, impossibly, the monitor beeped. Once. Twice. A weak rhythm, but a rhythm. Bumpy Johnson's heart was beating again. While Bumpy was dying and being brought back to life on an operating table, his people were already moving. Illinois Gordon didn't wait for confirmation. Didn't wait for proof. He started making calls. Street runners, numbers collectors, bartenders, shop owners, anyone who heard anything, saw anything, knew anything. By 2 a.m., the first lead came in. A bartender at a club on Lenox Avenue reported 3 men celebrating, buying drinks, talking loud about how the king is dead. One of them had blood on his shoes. Illinois got the names. Passed them to Junie. "You sure?" Junie asked. Sure enough to move. At 2:30 a.m., 8 of Bumpy's men left the hospital. They knew where the shooters were drinking. They knew where they'd go after. They knew their safe houses, their girlfriends' apartments, their escape routes. And they were already 3 steps ahead. The surgery ended at 3 a.m. Dr. Richardson was exhausted. He'd removed what bullets he could, repaired what damage was repairable, done everything medically possible. But Bumpy still wasn't conscious. His vitals were weak. His chances of surviving the next few hours were, in Richardson's professional opinion, less than 20%. A nurse asked, "Should we notify next of kin?" Richardson nodded grimly. "Yes, and prepare the family for the worst." At 3:15 a.m., Bumpy was moved to a private recovery room. 1 guard was posted outside his door. Not to protect him from enemies, everyone assumed if Bumpy Johnson died tonight, it would be from his injuries, not another attack. But at 3:45 a.m., something happened that the nurses couldn't explain. Bumpy's eyes opened. Not fully. Not clearly. But they opened. And his lips moved. The nurse on duty leaned close, trying to hear what he was saying. It was barely a whisper. Rough. Strained. "Get Illinois." By 4 a.m., Bumpy's men had located all 3 shooters. They'd split up after the celebration, thinking they were safe, thinking Bumpy was dead and his organization would collapse into chaos. They were wrong on both counts. The first shooter was found in an apartment in the Bronx. He never made it out of the building. The second was tracked to a girlfriend's place in Brooklyn. He tried to run. Didn't get far. The third, the one who'd allegedly organized the whole thing, was smarter. He'd already packed a bag, ready to leave New York entirely. But Junie Bird was waiting at the train station. According to street accounts, there was no conversation, no demands for information, no threats. Just quick, quiet work. By 5 a.m., all 3 men were gone. Illinois Gordon arrived at Harlem Hospital at 4:30 in the morning, responding to the nurse's call. He walked into Bumpy's recovery room, expecting to say goodbye. Instead, he found Bumpy awake. Barely. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, but his eyes were open and focused. "Illinois," Bumpy's voice was a rasp, barely audible. Illinois leaned close. "I'm here, Bump. Don't talk. Save your strength." "Did you find them?" Illinois hesitated. "We're working on it." Bumpy's hand moved slightly, trying to grip Illinois' arm. "Find them. All of them. Tonight." "Bumpy, you need to rest." "The doctors said." "I don't care what the doctors said." Each word seemed to cost him. "Find them. Send the message. Nobody touches me and walks away." Illinois nodded. "It's already done, Bump. Junie's handling it. All 3 are accounted for." Something changed in Bumpy's eyes then. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just cold, hard certainty. "Good. Now, spread the word. I'm not dead. And anyone who thought they could take my place, they were wrong." Illinois stared at him. "Bumpy, you can barely move." You need time to heal. Bumpy's grip tightened slightly. No. I need them to know. I'm still here. Still watching. Still in control. How do you want me to do that? According to legend, Bumpy said 5 words that would echo through Harlem for the next 20 years. Show them I survived. Tonight. By 5 a.m., before the sun even rose over Harlem, everyone knew. Bumpy Johnson was alive, awake, and had already given orders. The 3 shooters? Gone. Handled. Not arrested. Not on the run. Just gone. Street runners spread the word. Numbers collectors whispered it to their clients. Bartenders mentioned it to the early morning drinkers. Shop owners heard it from suppliers. By 5:30 a.m., the message had reached every corner of Harlem, every rival gang, every ambitious hustler who'd been waiting for Bumpy to die so they could make a move. The message was simple. Bumpy Johnson survived 12 bullets. And in the 6 hours since the shooting, he'd already retaliated from his hospital bed. Don't test him. Don't challenge him. Don't think for a second that him being in a hospital makes him weak. Special Agent Walter Hayes had been tracking Bumpy Johnson for 3 years. He had files on him. Surveillance reports. Informants inside Bumpy's organization. At 6:15 a.m., Hayes got a phone call from one of those informants. Bumpy got shot last night. 12 times. He's at Harlem Hospital. Hayes sat up in bed. Is he dead? No. He's alive. And he's already moving. 3 men who did it are all gone. Word is, Bumpy gave the orders from his hospital bed. Hayes hung up the phone and immediately called his supervisor. Sir, we need to move on Bumpy Johnson. Now. While he's vulnerable. His supervisor's response was cold. Vulnerable? Hayes. The man just survived an assassination attempt and eliminated the shooters in 6 hours while bleeding out in a hospital. Does that sound vulnerable to you? Hayes didn't have an answer. Because the truth was undeniable. Even half dead, Bumpy Johnson was more dangerous than most men at full strength. When the sun rose over Harlem on March 12, 1942, the streets were quieter than usual. Not because people were scared, because they were in awe. Bumpy Johnson had done something no one thought possible. He'd been shot a dozen times, left for dead in a pool of his own blood, and not only survived, he'd retaliated before sunrise. At Harlem Hospital, Dr. Richardson checked on Bumpy at 6:45 a.m. Bumpy was awake, still weak, still in pain, but alive. Mr. Johnson, Dr. Richardson said quietly, I don't know how you're still breathing. By every medical standard, you should be dead. Bumpy looked at him, his voice still rough but stronger than before. Doc, I'll die when I'm ready. And I'm not ready yet. Richardson shook his head. You're going to need weeks of recovery. Maybe months. No physical activity. No stress. Absolute rest. How long before I can walk? Walk? Mr. Johnson, you need to understand. How long? Richardson sighed. If you're lucky, 2 weeks before you can stand without assistance. A month before you can walk without pain. 3 months before you're anywhere near full strength. According to hospital records, Bumpy Johnson walked out of Harlem Hospital on his own 2 feet exactly 9 days later. Now, the exact number of bullets varies depending on who tells the story. Some say 12, others say 14. A few claim it was as many as 16. What's consistent across every version is this. Bumpy Johnson was shot multiple times at close range in an assassination attempt and survived. While recovering, he allegedly orchestrated the immediate elimination of those responsible. No arrests were made in connection with the shootings, neither the attack on Bumpy nor the disappearance of the three men suspected of carrying it out. No official investigation ever confirmed the details of that night. But what is documented is that by mid-1942, Bumpy Johnson's control over Harlem was absolute. Challenges to his authority virtually ceased. Rivals either fell in line or left the neighborhood entirely. The FBI's surveillance reports from that period note a marked change in Bumpy's status. Before the shooting, he was classified as a major organized crime figure. After, the classification changed to untouchable. Whether 12 bullets couldn't kill him, or whether the legend grew beyond the reality, what mattered was the message it sent. Bumpy Johnson wasn't just dangerous when he was healthy and armed and surrounded by his crew. He was dangerous when he was bleeding out on an operating table, when he was barely conscious in a hospital bed, when he couldn't even stand on his own, because his power didn't come from his physical presence. It came from the network he'd built, the loyalty he'd earned, the fear he'd cultivated, the intelligence that allowed him to stay 3 steps ahead even when he couldn't take a single step forward. That's what the assassination attempt proved. You could shoot Bumpy Johnson a dozen times, and it wouldn't matter. Because by the time you pulled the trigger, he'd already planned for what came next. Bumpy Johnson lived another 26 years after that night. He died in 1968, not from bullets, but from a heart attack. Natural causes. In his own neighborhood. On his own terms. The men who shot him in 1942 were never seen again. No bodies were ever found. No arrests were ever made. They simply disappeared from history, as completely as if they'd never existed. And for the rest of Bumpy's life, no one tried an ambush like that again. Because the lesson was clear. You could shoot the king, but if you didn't kill him, he'd make sure you never got a second chance. And in Harlem, Bumpy Johnson always got the last word. Look, here's what this story teaches us that goes beyond bullets and revenge. True power isn't measured by how much damage you can take. It's measured by what you can still accomplish even when you're at your weakest. Bumpy Johnson, lying in a hospital bed with a dozen bullet wounds, still had enough control over his organization to identify enemies, coordinate a response, and send a message that echoed through the entire underworld, all within 6 hours. That's not about physical strength. That's about infrastructure, loyalty, preparation, having systems in place that work, even when you can't be there to run them personally. Most leaders fall apart when they're taken out of commission. Their organizations collapse. Their enemies move in. Their allies scatter. Bumpy's organization got stronger, because everyone realized that even when he was barely alive, he was still more dangerous than anyone else in Harlem. That's the difference between a gangster and a legend. A gangster survives through violence. A legend survives through influence. And Bumpy Johnson proved that night that his influence was bulletproof. If this story showed you a different kind of strength, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Bumpy Johnson, the Harlem Godfather, for more legendary stories that reveal the real meaning of power. Turn on notifications so you never miss one. Drop a comment. Could you run an organization from a hospital bed? What does this story teach you about real power? Remember, in Harlem, respect wasn't given. It was earned. And Bumpy Johnson earned every ounce of his, even when he was bleeding out. This is Bumpy Johnson, the Harlem Godfather. And we're just getting started.